Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and today we're continuing with our ChiBi Let's Talk Lore series. Last episode, we left off with Zhou Yu's failed attempts on Liu Bei and Zhuge Liang's lives. Before Zhou Yu can cook up another attempt, a messenger from Cao Cao arrived and shifted his focus back to the war at hand. Zhou Yu, who was probably still frustrated that his plans earlier have been failed and thwarted by Zhuge Liang, refused to even read Cao Cao's message as he tossed it into the fire, and instead ordered for the messenger's head. While Lu Su warned Zhou Yu that it's tradition to spare the messenger when two parties are at war, Zhou Yu was in no mood as he had the messenger executed on the spot. Zhou Yu then orders the navy to get ready for a surprise attack as he planned to use the arrival of this messenger to launch a sneak attack against an unprepared Cao Cao, as he is probably still waiting for a response. So in the early hours of the next morning, Zhou Yu sends out Gan Ning as the vanguard unit, with Han Dan and Jiang Qin flanking on his two sides. As Gan Ning's ship arrived out of the early morning fog at Cao Cao's camp, Cai Mao and Zhang Yun, who are both surrendered generals who used to work for Liu Bei, launched their defensive force on the left and right flank. Now, naval combat back then relies heavily on archers shooting at each other from the decks of their ships, but as most of Cao Cao's best archers are northerners who are not accustomed to naval combat, many struggled with seasickness and had trouble even standing straight on the decks. Conversely, Gan Ning, who used to be a pirate before joining Wu, lived on the water all his life, and the skilled Wu archers made quick work of Cao Cao's vanguard units. As Han Dan and Jiang Qin's flank also joined in, Cao Cao's forces took heavy losses, but fortunately for them, they did have the numbers advantage, as they were able to launch more and more ships from the shore into battle, as their entire camp woke up to the fact that they were under attack. Not willing to risk turning this sneak attack win into a bogged down loss, Zhou Yu sounded the retreat as Gan Ning's ship turned around and pulled back. With the vanguard unit decimated, Cai Mao and Zhang Yun did not give chase as they reported back to Cao Cao. Cao Cao was understandably furious, as they outnumber Wu's forces at least 17-1, yet such a small force was able to inflict such a heavy loss on their force in just their first battle. Cao Cao questioned Cai Mao and Zhang Yun's ability to successfully train the northerners into a fit naval combat force, and Cai Mao suggested that they just simply needed more time, and suggested that they could line their ship into a massive ship fort so troops can encamp on the ship to spend more time on the water and get more accustomed to naval combat. He promises to have the troops ready by the end of winter, and since Cao Cao really had no choice other than these two, since all his other generals are even worse in naval combat, he relented and allowed Cai Mao to continue to lead the navy, but warned him if anything like this happens again, then it's off with his head. So Cai Mao proceeds to set up a massive ship fort by lining up ships next to each other and hand-picked units to encamp on these ships, as he hoped to get everyone ready for the next battle. This was a great plan for these northern troops to gain experience on the water, and Zhou Yu's scouts soon took notice as they reported back massive ship forts forming alongside Cao Cao's camp. So that night, Zhou Yu took a single speedboat for himself and traveled up to the ship fort to take note of the training and preparation. Obviously, Cai Mao and Zhang Yun ordered their ships to intercept Zhou Yu once their scouts located his ship. But Zhou Yu was prepared and didn't come here to battle, so he quickly turned around and sailed back downstream to his base camp. Unable to catch Zhou Yu, Cai Mao reported this incident back to Cao Cao, which only doubled his anger. As Cao Cao raged at how Zhou Yu is single-handedly beating his navy, a strategist walked forth and declared that perhaps he can be of some use when it comes to dealing with Zhou Yu. Cao Cao looks up and sees Jiang Gan, who is from the same hometown as Zhou Yu, and the two grew up together as classmates. Cao Cao asks Jiang Gan what he can do for them. Jiang Gan replies that since Zhou Yu does not yet know that he currently works here with Cao Cao, perhaps he can approach Zhou Yu alone, and he can rely on his past relationship to become an effective spy for Cao Cao. Cao Cao agrees and sends Jiang Gan off. Once Jiang Gan arrives at Zhou Yu's camp, Zhou Yu welcomes his old friend warmly, but he clearly knows there's no such thing as coincidence in this world, as the war with Cao Cao just started, and at this moment, his longtime classmate, who has lost touch with him, suddenly comes to visit. At best, he is a mediator trying to convince Zhou Yu to surrender, and at worst, he is a spy for Cao Cao. But regardless, Zhou Yu has his own plans for his old friend. As he made some preparations, he welcomed Jiang Gan with a big feast, as the two of them have not seen each other for a while. Not only is this a private feast between these two classmates, Zhou Yu purposely invited all his fellow Wu generals to the feast and introduced each one of them to Jiang Gan. As the party got started and drinks started flowing, Zhou Yu started showing Jiang Gan throughout the camp, detailing where units are deployed, where supplies are kept. As a spy, Jiang Gan is super delighted that the mission is going so well, as Zhou Yu is openly sharing everything. As the feast wore on, Zhou Yu kept on drinking, and soon he was visibly drunk to the point where he started performing a sword dance for everyone. Sensing that Zhou Yu was now drunk, Jiang Gan wanted to ask a few more pointed questions about details of the campaign, but Zhou Yu quickly threw his sword to Tai Shi and said, Tai Shi, you hold on to this sword. Today is a feast among friends. We're not here to talk about war or politics. If anyone dares to break this rule, then use my sword to kill them. So Jiang Gan shuts up about the war and sits through the rest of the feast as he chatted up with Zhou Yu about the old times. And Zhou Yu got more and more drunk and crazier throughout the night. By the end of the feast, Zhou Yu asked Jiang Gan, "Come, sleep in my tent, like the old days when we were both students." Jiang Gan hears this and happily accepts, as he has now gained the chance to spend a night inside Zhou Yu's tent, where he can check to see if he can find any documents about war or any secrets that Zhou Yu might be hiding. And at worst, he'd be able to hear a drunk Zhou Yu perhaps spill some secrets during sleep talk. Once in bed, Jiang Gan spent the first hour just waiting Zhou Yu out, waiting for him to fully pass out to make sure that he was actually asleep before getting up to check out Zhou Yu's tent. As he got up, he made double sure that Zhou Yu was asleep by calling out his name to make sure that he can't wake up. And he also waited to hear Zhou Yu snore before started searching through Zhou Yu's desk. As he searched, he found standard military deployment documents, maps, all good stuff. But at the bottom of the pile, he found a letter. The letter is from Cai Mao and Zhang Yun, and it's addressed to Zhou Yu. After a careful reading, Jiang Gan was sure he found the Holy Grail, as the document detailed how Cai Mao and Zhang Yun have been secretly working for Zhou Yu this whole time as they mismanaged and mistrained Cao Cao's men, and more shockingly, they were both planning to find an opportune time to assassinate Cao Cao to end this war by cutting the head off the snake. This was the huge news that Jiang Gan was looking for he was certain that this would bring him a huge reward with Cao Cao and breakthrough for his career, as it essentially is saving Cao Cao's lives. So he grabs the letter, hides it on himself as he returns to bed to pretend to fall asleep, even though his excitement prevented him from actually falling asleep. And very soon, a messenger arrived and tried to wake up a drunken Zhou Yu. So Jiang Gan laid very still and pretended to be sound asleep as the messenger slaps Zhou Yu awake and tells him that he's an important messenger from the North Bank. Zhou Yu quickly becomes alert as he motions the messenger to be quiet. He then calls out to Jiang Gan to check if he was asleep, and then tried to shake him a few times just to make sure. Jiang Gan simply flipped over and started to snore to pretend he was sound asleep as he listened carefully to what the messenger said. But the messenger and Zhou Yu whispered in a low tone, and all he could make out were some broken statement that included phrases like, "The timing is not right, the two of them will try," and Cao Cao's head. Now with this information, combined with the letter he found earlier, it only reinforms Jiang Gan that Cai Mao and Zhang Yun are indeed enemy spies working for Zhou Yu. So he kept still until Zhou Yu fell back asleep. And in the early hours of the next morning, before Zhou Yu woke up, Jiang Gan hurried out the tent and walked out of camp by telling the guards that he had a nice time catching up with his old friend Zhou Yu, but he is on his way farther south to visit another friend. And the guards didn't make things difficult for him as he returned to his boat and sailed away. Once Jiang Gan got back to Cao Cao's camp, he reported back everything he had seen and presented the letter to Cao Cao, who was already furious at how inefficient Cai Mao and Zhang Yun has been. And as Cao Cao has always been suspicious of betrayals and assassinations, as he was the survivor of many assassination attempts on his life, he immediately ordered for the execution of Cai Mao and Zhang Yun, without even giving the two of them a chance to explain themselves. After the executioner returned with their head, Cao Cao's anger finally subsided, but he soon realized that this was a trap, and that he had just executed the only two generals capable of training his northern troop for naval combat. Regardless, Cao Cao is not one for apologies or capable of admitting his mistakes. He merely thanked Jiang Gan and also asked him to make a return journey to find out more about Zhou Yu and continue to act as a spy at Zhou Yu's camp to see if he could flip anyone who disagreed with Zhou Yu. Jiang Gan agrees and returns to Zhou Yu to serve as a spy. Not long after, the news of Cai Mao and Zhang Yun's execution filtered back to Zhou Yu's camp, where Lu Su congratulated Zhou Yu on how well his feast went last night. Zhou Yu, full of himself right now, as he finally was able to trick someone with a successful ploy after failing so many times against Zhuge Liang, asked Lu Su to simply share this news with Zhuge Liang and see how he thinks about this, as he now wanted to show off his accomplishments. So Lu Su reluctantly goes, as he certainly knows this will not end well. To find out what Zhuge Liang will say about Zhou Yu's success and what other plans Zhou Yu has planned for Jiang Gan and Zhuge Liang, come back next time as we continue our lore series.